What is up, everyone, and welcome to the Occult Rejects. In this episode, we will be continuing the Tarot series with the Major Arcana. And again, in this episode, I'm very lucky to have Megan and Mario with me today, as in the last two episodes. If you haven't listened to the last two already, I highly suggest to go back and listen to those first. If this is the first time coming across this channel or this series, just to let you know, going forward, we will be showing the Toth deck first and then the Rider deck after the fact. Unfortunately, I am a little bit more used to the Magical Golden Dawn Tarot deck. If I was to start covering 3 decks in this series, it'd probably turn into 10 episodes. So just unfortunately for me, I'm leaving that one out, but now I get to learn these other cards better. I guess so. It works out anyway for me. And I'll let Megan go first. Megan, let everybody know who you are and what your deal is.
Hey everyone. So my first name is Megan, but I go by 7 Degrees of Wisdom. So I'm a practicing occultist, academic, tarot reader, paranormal investigator. So I offer tarot readings and a varying number of consultations, and I do teach a lot of different classes. I'm from the Fort Smith, Arkansas area. I read at 2 shops in Fort Smith, Arkansas. If you guys are interested in any of my services, you can contact me at 7 Degrees of Wisdom on Instagram. That's my main page. There's no numbers on the end, no underscores, just 7 Degrees of Wisdom. And then you can also find me on Facebook at Megan Allen, parentheses, 7 Degrees of Wisdom spelled out, if you want to contact me for anything.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Megan. And I think maybe I put the links in already in the bottom. If people are watching now on the live, I think both of these guests' links are in the bottom. I do also just want to mention as well, after this series is over, me and Megan do have actually a lot of things kind of already planned. So there will be a lot of other things me and her will be working on, especially like when it actually comes to occultism and showing people stuff that like maybe they never even heard of before. And I know she has mentioned possibly doing lives on Instagram together, which I am interested in. So,
Yep.
yeah, after the tarot series, we had a bunch of things planned. And then, like, we started doing the tarot series. And I told her, I said, why don't we just put everything on hold until after that? And let's just play this out first.
Yeah.
So, we definitely got plenty of things that I'm really looking forward to covering with her as well. And last but not least, Mario from Symbolic Studies. Sir, let everybody know who you are.
Yeah, so my project is called Symbolic Studies, as you just mentioned. I've been studying symbolism for a number of years, mostly because I'm a graphic designer of 20 now. I can't believe it. And so graphic design kind of naturally led me to want to understand more about some of the shapes and colors and imagery I was working with. And so I started my symbolic journey kind of heavily, I would say maybe 10 years ago, something like that, 12 ago. And a lot of my material covers the zodiac, the signs of astrology. I focus on the tarot as well, and then I go into other tangents too. A lot of stuff relating to the northern sky, the North Star, Ursa Major Minor. That's kind of one of my things. And if people want to find my stuff, they can check out symbolicstudies.com, and YouTube is one of my hubs as well, at Symbolic Studies, and Instagram too, so symbolic.studies. In addition to design, I also read tarot cards and give consultations and study sessions and private lessons and stuff like that. But thanks for having me, man. This has been a fun series so far. It's really, it's always a good time running through the major arcana, and I feel like if you're always studying, and reading stuff about occultism and symbolism and everything, every time you revisit the tarot, it's like you have another level of awareness of what's really going on there.
Very, very true.
Right.
Yeah, very well said. I remember when I first started getting into kind of like getting into magic and practicing. There was a couple of people like on YouTube or books or whatever that I was reading. Remember, I think it was on YouTube, somebody that was following on YouTube. And I think that they had said, if your thoughts about magic and spirituality doesn't change while you're a magician, you're not doing something right.
Yeah.
There you go.
He says if you're believing and look at things the same way you did from a year ago today, you fucked up.
Yeah.
He's like, you should at least be adding on to, and I
Yeah.
think that's very well said what you just said right there. All right. I think like if you're really in search of stuff, you can go back to stuff that you looked at 6 months ago and be like, wow, I totally see something different now.
I do that
Yeah.
all the time.
Oh yeah,
All
for
the
me
time.
too. I hate when like I come across something basic and I'm like, I covered this in a show 8 months ago, and I'm like, I could have said another 20 minutes on this now.
Yeah.
I can edit myself. I'm like,
Yeah. Yep.
Oh yeah.
it's like I don't want to
I
just
get it.
cover that again and add an extra 20 minutes. So it's like, oh well.
Well, that's one of the beautiful things about the tarot too is when people come to me for a reading and they don't really know anything about the cards or they're just starting, the whole system is very scalable to your awareness of things and your consciousness, so whether you're just getting into it, obviously there's a lot to learn, a lot to know. And then even if you've been studying it for 20, 30 years, there's still a lot to learn and a lot to know. So it's a really multifaceted, multi-layered sort of thing. So I just encourage people, regardless of where they're at, it's like appreciate the journey, and it's totally okay to not have a complete awareness of some of these cards, because really, kind of in a way, no one has a complete awareness of these things, because it's just, we're dealing with the spiritual realm. And so it just goes on and on and on and on and on. It's just this never-ending well of information, basically.
Yeah. I feel like that every day.
I totally agree.
Right.
I was gonna say after you were done, I was gonna say unless your brain has snapped, you probably haven't figured it all out yet. Because in my opinion, if you were to figure it all out, I don't even think you could be able to handle it. So,
Sure.
If you're still mentally okay, there's still more to figure out.
Definitely. And that's why I call my channel Symbolic Studies, because I really do look at myself as the perpetual student. Always want to keep on learning.
Pupil.
Yeah.
That's right.
That's kind of why I have my name too, 7 Degrees of Wisdom. It's like, 7's a spiritual number. There's so many things that are associated with the number 7.
Right.
And I value wisdom above all, really. And so that's why my name is, 7 Degrees of Wisdom.
Nice. I love it.
I have some things that I wanted to kind of go over like really quickly, because this is like a perfect segue into what I wanted to say.
Sure, go for it.
Yeah, go for it.
So we haven't really talked about the major arcana like as a whole and what it is. So we've talked about the individual cards. So I just have some notes here that I wanted to kind of go over so that people can understand what the tarot really is. So the 22 archetypes help you recognize your multi-dimensionality. They are in the occult, they're called the keys. So there's 22 keys of mystical ascension and transformation. That's what the cards are about. So it's 22 versions of your higher self. So when you're pulling these cards out, this is what this stuff is meant to like represent. They reflect the aspects back from other realms and parallels to each other. So like at one given time, like I'm in hermit mode right now. Tomorrow I might be in like strength mode because something happened and I'll have to deal with that. And so that's kind of how it graduates. They're like different radio stations that you can connect to. They're the wavelengths, the energy that you can kind of tap into. The goal of the whole tarot is to bring the 22 archetypes together in one in this lifetime so that you can transcend the cycle of reincarnation. That's why they call it the fool's journey or the hero's journey, is because it's so hard, because you have to learn all the occult stuff and the symbolism and the numerology to fully understand these archetypes, and then use them in your daily life, right? So they're like states of becoming. They're like key lessons of each path. So they cause like a shift in consciousness, which, creates a change in your personal alchemy. Also, the cards can be read from front to back to reveal different secrets in the storyline. It's like, and then if you read them backwards, it's the creation story. So depending if you go forward from 0 to 21 or from 21 to 0, they tell a different story in our evolution as humans.
I think a good way, not to interrupt you, I think a good way to even add to that so people can maybe get visualization.
Yeah.
If you throw the cards on the tree, I think going down and going up is two different stories.
Hmm.
So like just right there, like in what you were saying, I could see.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get at.
Yeah.
And so they're also, if you line up the 231 gates, they're the keys with the Hebrew letters. You kind of have, I don't know if you remember in high school how you'd be in like geometry class and you would have like the circle with the dots and you get a ruler and connect them all, right? So that's how, like, that represents the 31 gates. So that center point is where spirit emerges. So say, you had time. It's one dot, one area, and it expands out. Well, as it expands out, that's where you get creation, and then you have archetypes that represent this type of creation. So the keys, major arcana 0 through 7, they represent the preparation of the great work. Okay, so they go in sections. Then the keys arcana, which is the arcana. When I call them keys, I'm talking about arcana. So 8 through 14 connects the first 4 stages of alchemy in your process. And then keys 15 to 21 is the final 3 stages of alchemy. So that's the occult perspective of the major arcana and the tarot. I just kind of wanted to go over that really quickly so that it could be understood on a kind of a different level or facet.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I think it's a good idea to kind of look at the tarot system broadly too, actually. And I'll just say one of the things I'll add to all of this is that one of the things that has helped me out is kind of understanding the difference between the minor arcana and the major arcana and their different roles, right? And so we're dealing with a system of 5 elements. So 4 base elements: air, water, fire, earth, and then the 5th element, which would be spirit. And so the minor arcana is broken up into 4 different suits. There's 14 cards per suit: air, water, fire, earth. And then the major arcana is actually the 5th element. And so it's more narrative, it's more symbolic, it's more psychological. And I would say that there's an arc to it, there's a story to it, the path of the fool, right?
Yeah.
And so sometimes what I like to do is I'll like to get a deck and I will I'll put them all the cards in order. And so I'll have the 4 suits of the major arcana, the minor arcana, and I will put them in 4 different stacks, and I will put them side by side so that it's a 2x2 sort of grid.
I do that too.
Right. And then I get the major arcana, and I think that there's a few different ways of kind of associating it with those 4 stacks, right? You can put it right in the middle, and it's kind of like the 5th point. It's like this point of transcendence, I guess, or ascension, if you will. Or sometimes I even make a circle of the major arcana around those 4 stacks. And so to me, this is symbolically representing the difference between these systems. And so the 4 elements being like the 4 pillars, and then the 5th element, spirit, the major arcana, being the 5th aspect of everything, which is kind of driving everything, and is from which all of the other elements came from. So there's this really interesting relationship with spirit where all of the elements came from spirit, and it's you could say that the spirit encompasses all of the elements and then a bunch of other stuff as well. So anyway, so just wanted to point that out. Minor arcana, 4 elements; major arcana, it also includes the 4 elements and the symbolism and how everything is structured and all of that. But it really, really heavily, to me, connects to spirit, and therefore the spiral, the wheel, all of these other types of things. So
perfect. Yeah.
Awesome.
Great stuff. Yeah, I really do think, and I'll just keep it short and sweet for me. But with the major arcana, I always looked at them more as like what you were saying before with the alchemy. It's I feel like that's like showing like just for me like alchemy, like change of energy or the outcome from alchemy. Just from my experience, from the way I look at them, they seem like a lot of like the changing of something or the direction of energy is now changing. Hard way
Right.
to explain it, but
Well, even the I Ching, one of the names for the I Ching is that it's a book of changes, and I look at the tarot very much the same way. It's just a book of changes, It's the book of Thoth, but it's
really,
the book of changes. And what is Thoth all about? What is Mercury all about? He's a shapeshifter. He's super fluid. He's always moving. He's the messenger of the gods, So to your point, Megan, yeah, it's just these are points in time. They're going to come and go, and they're going to pass and all that.
Yeah.
mm. That was a thing that I thought was very interesting. You mentioned, I guess, Thoth and Mercury and stuff. If on the bottom of the tree, there's probably something to it. I just can't get into it now. But like, I thought it was interesting how on the bottom part of the tree you could have Thoth associated with the sphere 8, and if you like add heat to Mercury, it technically, in a thermometer, defies gravity, doesn't it? It will rise up regardless of gravity pushing down on it, as long as there's heat there. And then Venus, which is associated with copper or Netsock, across the tree. Now, on the other side, the planet Venus doesn't actually have its own gravitational core. So I just thought it was funny how like both of them, in their own different ways, have something to do with gravity and defying it or not having it. And I was
Mm.
like, does that have anything to do with rising up the tree?
Yeah.
It's a weird
Yeah.
thought I had one day. I don't know. And it wasn't even, I was like watching shit on planets, and this guy had these ideas.
I do that all the time. I'll be watching just random documentaries and I'll connect things together and I'll be like, oh,
And if people are like,
okay.
watching planets for, in my opinion, planets, if you were to, the way I look at it, if you look at the numbers and some of the things they say, my opinion, that's all occultism. So
It is.
not like I'm buying into the fact that Saturn's really up there and those are real pictures of Saturn. No, I just want to see what the occultists are telling me that what that is.
Yeah.
Right.
All right, so now I'll shut up and we'll get to the cards already. So here we go. We have, which I skipped last week by accident. I ended up going to the Chariot card. I left out the Lovers. So here is the Thoth deck, the Lovers card, and Mario, this is all you.
Right on. Awesome. Yeah. So it's perfect because of Gemini season corresponding with Gemini. Sorry, Gemini season corresponding with the Lovers. There you can see in the bottom right hand corner, right, the Gemini glyph. The Gemini glyph, man, I mean, there's so much to unpack with it in and of itself because it looks like Roman numeral 2. And so you've got those twin pillars, right? You're going to see the twin pillars in the Kabbalistic tree of life. You're going to see in Judaism twin pillars in front of synagogues, and in front of Solomon's temple, as an example. This implies that there's a polarity going on, that there's a light and a dark. And this coincides really nicely with Gemini mythology and the hero twins. And a lot of different cultures around the world have had this idea of these hero twins. And generally, one is good, one is bad. Oftentimes, the bad twin kills the good twin. This is very, very similar to the story of Cain and Abel, where Cain kills Abel. And in fact, this is interesting because they are brothers, right? And my understanding is that, and I don't have any decks that reflect this, but I have read this before in a few of my books, that a really early name for this card was not the Lovers, actually, but the Brothers, which I think is really fascinating. Also, in Freemasonry, there's a lot of twin pillar symbolism. And what do Freemasons call each other? Brothers, right? And so I see a lot of esoteric Jewish symbolism baked into this card. And I see a lot of Freemasonic symbolism baked into this card. Also, take into the fact, right, that this is the 6th card. And the Star of David has 6 points as well, right? And so I actually see a really interesting correspondence between the Abrahamic religions and the 4th, 5th, and 6th card of the Major Arcana, which I've made a video about. And so there's all of that. But
Real
the
quick,
lover,
Mario, I just wanted to add with the word brother.
please.
You mentioned it before, brothers. Even in the OTO, which I used to be a member of the OTO
Mhm.
many moons ago. You're either considered a brother, sister, or a sibling. So I mean,
Ah,
in that too, which
gotcha.
Broly.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And so here you see symbolically the brothers, I think, down below with the 2 children, right? It's interesting because you're going to see in other decks, I don't think the ones that we're exploring today, but a really common version of the Sun card depicts 2 children in front of a brick wall, right? And so for a long time, this kind of eluded me, and I'm like, what is going on here? It has everything to do with Gemini. So just real quick, a really fascinating tangent that I went down. My understanding is that in ancient Babylon, Gemini season was referred to as the brick mold. And this was because they resumed baking bricks outside underneath the sun. And this coincides with masonry, Freemasonry, building things out of stones and bricks and things like that, right? And so you will find that there's a number of myths involving hero twins, where the hero twins were actually the founders of a city, and they're credited for building the first wall in certain myths. The most popular one is in Rome with Romulus and Remus. So Romulus is literally where we get Rome from, and they say that Rome was founded by these two brothers. The evil twin killed the good twin, and there's different illustrations and things like this, lore and myths, that they built the first brick wall in Rome. And so they show them literally building this brick wall. And my understanding too is that I believe it's Romulus kills Remus. I could be mistaken on that. I always get it flipped. But Romulus kills Remus at this brick wall. So there's brick symbolism baked into hero twin storylines, which kind of just blows my mind for a few different reasons. And there was actually a big storyline several years ago that took place during Gemini season and involved these pallets of bricks showing up all over the country to be used in riots and whatnot. And the story that sparked all of this, when you look into it, there's a lot of twin symbolism that was being kind of thrown out there as well. So this is like a ritualistic sort of thing. This idea of Gemini bricks, and Gemini season being the brick mold and what have you. So that's kind of a side tangent with everything.
A fascinating one, by the way. Thank you. That was awesome.
I could go into it more, but yeah, no, I think so too. When I started learning about all this stuff, I was like, my mind was completely blown. So that is why you see that brick wall in a lot of older sun cards with two children, because the return of the sun actually has a lot to do with Gemini as well. It's the last sign of spring, so beginning of Cancer is like the official start of, at least in tropical astrology in the modern world, of summer. And so there's all of that stuff. But really it's about polarity. It's about duality. It's about the black and the white, the positive and the negative coming together in unison. So it's expressed here as, this couple being united. And generally, in a lot of other lovers cards, you're going to see at least three figures. You're going to see a man and a woman and kind of what looks like a priest. So it's usually two men and a woman. The funny thing is, though, when you look at other older lovers cards, it's very confusing who is with who and what is going on. They're kind of all touching each other and their hands are in like really weird positions and stuff. And this is intentional. This is by design. And so there's this kind of confusing sort of aspect about, this uniting of the poles of the polarity via this third figure. And so here it's expressed as kind of what looks like, an expression of the hermit or, this high priest sort of thing. He's hooded and he has his hands above, the couple there. And so there's usually this kind of triangular sort of dynamic going on between these two figures and then something else that's uniting the two, which when you're talking about unifying polarities or dualities, there's always this third thing. And so I think this is what Hermes Trismegistus, the thrice great Hermes, is all about, is that he's known as being androgynous, right? And so he can swing either which way, either side of the pole. He can be more feminine, he can be more masculine, he can express both sides, meaning that he's kind of a bridge unto himself between the poles, between the negative and the positive. And so he's kind of an expression of this third thing, if you will, basically, which is why he, in so many different ways, he corresponds with the number 3. So from the 1 comes the 2, and from the 2 comes the 3. Basically. And that third thing unites the positive and the negative. It means that you can actually operate on the spectrum and go between these different places. And so The other thing I'll say real quick too is that the Hebrew letter associated with this card is Zain, and that means sword. And then there in the background you have the swords, and sword symbolism relates to air, right? There's a divisive thing with swords. It's intended to sever, it's intended to cut, it's intended to break things. And so, in a way, this relates to our minds, which is related to air symbolism, because our minds like to be very analytical. And so, we actually like to label things, we like to categorize things, versus, say, our hearts, our emotions tend to put things together and fuse things together. So it's the difference between this holistic sort of idea and encapsulating things and bringing things together versus breaking things down and kind of putting things into different subsets or categories or whatever. And
You know what, real quick, Mario, I just want to
go ahead,
add what's
please.
wild is what you just said. I'm looking at it and it falls between Binah and Tifereth. And like you just explained, like both of those spheres with that card, Tifereth is like perfect balance. And Binah, in my opinion, that's like, I mean, you even have like it's a lot of just like structure and thoughts. And very archetype, and like, I mean, you even have the Sith with the Grim Reaper that would go with there. I mean, that's cleaving things off, cutting stuff off, the end of maybe a relationship.
Dude,
You know what I'm
well,
saying? Like the death of something, or the removal of something and now becoming something new. So you said both things, in my opinion, just right there.
No, you totally got it. Because since we're talking about this card and it's related to Gemini season, again, the Gemini glyph is Roman numeral 2. When I first got into symbolism, my natural instinct was that the number 2 represents things coming together, two halves coming together. And actually, when you really look into it, the number 2 is more about division. It's actually about conflict. It's actually about separation. So think about a cell dividing as an example. So think about the 1 becoming the 2. And so, in my personal opinion, there's only one 1. There can only ever be one 1. And then that 2 came from that 1. It's split off. And then the third thing came from that as well. And then the fourth thing and the fifth thing and everything else. So numbers are actually a division of the whole. There isn't two twos. So 2 actually represents this divide. It represents this separation sort of thing. So 2 actually has a lot to do with conflict and war and aggression and things butting heads and whatnot. There is an aspect to it of things coming together, which you can see here. This couple is uniting and they're holding hands and everything else. But when you really break down the symbolism of 2, it's actually it's very, very much this separation sort of idea. The 2 coming from the 1, breaking off from each other. And that's the whole thing with love too. And that's the whole thing of what's going on here as well, is that we're all seemingly separate entities, but we all came from this one thing, from the cosmos, if you will, or from the Great Mother, or whatever your perspective on that might be. But there's an illusion of separation. And the whole thing is that things are separated to reunite. And so it reminds me of a Taurus field. Energy is projected, separated, and then comes back into itself and is united. It reminds me of the heart, the point in the middle. Energy is separated only to return back to itself.
Yeah, like a Taurus field.
Totally. So separation actually is a necessary part of unification and of union. So that's a lot of what's being expressed here as well, I think.
Yeah. Oh,
like the saying, if you love something, set it free.
Sure.
And then, if it's meant to, it'll come back. So you can kind of look at it from that perspective too. There's, a couple things I'll say about this one. One, the phrase alchemical wedding comes to mind when I see this.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah.
To like say more on your point of separation, that this is a card of polarity, duality. This represent, Gemini is an air sign. I like the choice of color here that they used, because it reminds me of like air and fire together. And so to me, like, just when I look at this, the things that just stand out to me as duality and polarity and coming together as one from being separate. I like that there's a cosmic egg there on the bottom too. And you have the lion and the eagle symbolism. I'm just now noticing the swords in the background. I didn't notice that before. And then of course you have a cherubim on top. Because traditionally I think it's Archangel, is it Gabriel that's in the Rider Waite, or is it Uriel?
Oh, good question. I'm not sure.
I think I
I've
want to
heard a couple
say,
different interpretations, but
oh, it's Raphael. Okay, I have it here. Raphael is there too. So I like that he kind of threw the angel in there as well, even though he's got like the magus, waving his hands over them, creating an alchemical wedding. Is what I would interpret this one as.
makes sense. Gemini is ruled by Mercury, the magician card, Magus. So,
Yeah.
yeah, there's a lot of mercurial energy here for sure. But yeah,
Mm,
no, the alchemical wedding, 100%.
very interesting. Yeah, that's even like what makes me think. Again, you're going back to Mercurial. Again, like I was even joking about before with like adding heat to it. Again, it's something that can change direction, which is exactly what I think sometimes these cards are showing. Is just a directional change.
Yeah.
You know.
Mm-hmm. Sure,
Um,
sure.
Something I did want to add with this that I found was interesting. Like at the bottom, like you have the white and the black kind of crossing hands going from and then the other ones are like kind of like on each other's side in a sense. I found that weird, just wondering if it was like showing a crossing and an uncrossing. Um, Thinking about, unfortunately, prior to the chariot, thinking about the chariot card, uh, like depending, I guess, what deck. But I know with the Golden Dawn, and I think it's even with this deck, you'll have black and a white on the front of it. Um, I think you had said something about it, like a good brother and a bad brother,
Yeah.
that made me think about. And the reason why I'm bringing up the chariot card is, and this is something I'd actually really like to do. I do think I could show like the matrix in tarot and with the tree of life. I think I could actually cover it, showing the transcendence. In the chariot part, I do think that was when you had those two twin brothers. Even though they were both white, prior to them, the lady that Neo has to kiss does tell them that they were upgraded version of these other two.
Mm.
One worked fine, the other one would sometimes do whatever the fuck it wanted. So it didn't work out well. For some reason, all this bullshit I'm spewing about made me think about how I thought that those two are on the chariot, and now talking about the bad brother and the good brother that they replaced. And then I saw those two on the bottom, and it made me, I don't know, have
Mm.
all
No,
the
makes sense.
very weird, but
No, makes sense.
yeah.
Yeah, no, dude, you're solid for
Yeah.
sure. One of the things I will say also regarding Gemini symbolism and how this card is just basically all about Gemini in my personal opinion. One of the kind of important aspects is I think a lot of people always want to externalize things, obviously, and I have a tendency to do that too, but externalize, this card being like, oh, it's always about a relationship with someone else. It's always a romantic relationship, or there's this external sort of partnership element that this must mean. And I think there is obviously something to be said about that, but where I'm kind of at with Gemini and what Gemini represents, or one of its potential meanings, is that I think that there's an aspect with Gemini symbolism. If we're dealing with the twins, you're actually dealing with the relationship with yourself, with your invisible self, And so in ancient Egypt, they would refer to this as the Ka, So it's your invisible twin, basically your soul, if you want to call it that, right? And so that's the most important relationship you have to maintain, and that's who you have to be honest with, and that is also the relationship that I think requires the most work, because that is going to affect everything else around you. It's going to affect all of your other relationships. So I think partly the Gemini symbol, the twins, it's you and yourself. So just wanted to throw that out there as well. I think it's one of the more practical sort of aspects of Gemini that I've kind of come across. In a way, kind of reminds me. There's a lot of cartoons, actually, funny enough, that have explored this idea, right? The devil and the angel on your shoulder, sort of thing. It kind of reminds me of that whole entire dynamic.
Yeah.
Because we all have, all of the gods and demons are within us. That's my personal opinion. And so if you don't keep them in check, then it can be very destructive or detrimental. So I think it has a lot to do with the relationship you have with yourself.
Very well
Agreed.
said.
Yep.
Sure. And then we'll go on to the next one. Lovers.
Okay. So this one is the Rider-Waite, of course. So I will also note that the universal Rider-Waite, as opposed to this Rider-Waite, the colors they're a little bit different. And you could almost say that the universal, you can get a little bit more color symbolism out of it. But so the lovers, whenever this comes up in a reading, to me, I don't know, Mario, if you like doing love readings, but I'm not big on them. And so it's just something I'm not super interested in. If it comes up, it comes up. But, you know, but so this can have romantic connotations, of course. But for me, when this comes up in a reading, it's about them making a really big decision that's going to have lasting ramifications on the rest of their life path. So that will that's how I interpret that when it comes up in a reading. Because I mean, for the most part, readings that we do, people are looking for like career and finance and stuff like that. But sometimes, so there's only a couple of romantic cards in the deck: the Two of Cups, this card, and the Knight of Cups. So I just want to kind of touch on that a little bit for those who are wondering about, the name is the Lovers. So it's about, romantic relationships. It can mean that, but more often than not, I mean, isn't a relationship a big decision that's going to have lasting ramifications on your life? I mean, that's, who you choose to live your life with. So this card, the secret name, occult name for this card is the Children of the Voice Divine. And it's really connected to the cards before it because it's at the end of that alchemical process. It represents polarity and duality and free will, because we all have free will to make the choices that we do. It's about relationships, discernment, listening to the information, and deciding how to apply the guidance that you're getting from your life. It's all about reciprocation and balance and symmetry and harmony and beauty. It's actually the center Sephiro on the tree. And it can also represent cycles of emotional states, and directing your consciousness by turning inwards. It's representative of Adam and Eve. And then it has, the tree of life behind it. You have the one with the snake, and then you have the one with the flames. So the flames represent the 12 signs of the zodiac. And they also represent the 12 physical dimensions as well, for ascension. So they say that we have up to 12. I've heard different things that it's higher, but for the most part, you hear that we have like 12 dimensions, and that's, basically where the Ein is, where it goes a step further. The entities that reside there are ascended past the point of coming down. So you have the tree with the fruit. So it's like the fruit, it's knowledge. The snake represents awakening. And it also represents the choice to remain in a higher realm or a higher vibration, a higher state. It keeps your attention inwards towards your higher self with that chemical wedding, that union of yourself, like Mario was saying, the two coming together into one again. Traditionally, Raphael is on this card, and he's all about healing and harmony. And he's also attributed to the sixth Sephiro. And then there's also sun symbolism, which is source, life energy. The mountain in the back represents the great work going on, the journey to complete the great work. It's the peak. It's the home of the gods. It's also a phallic symbol as well. And it also represents the Hermetic principle of polarity. So finding your true path, faith, devotion, versatility. And it also represents the art of relating to people, and it is a mirror that you put up in front of yourself. So that's where the other Gemini and twin symbolism will come in as well. It's like this card puts up a mirror in front of you and lets you figure out what you need to do to kind of move on in your alchemical process of ascension, right? Let me see if I've got anything else. So that's pretty much all I have on that one. Mara, awesome. If you want to talk about some other aspects.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, no, you just mentioned ascension, and when you're dealing with the Kabbalistic tree of life, you have those two pillars on the side. You got that central pillar, right? And so I always equate that central pillar with the pillar of ascension. It's the middle way. It's the middle path. Here you have the two trees, the two lovers, and then you have that central path right in the middle. And you've got all of this really potent symbolism right there in the middle of the card, right? As though there were this other pillar. And so that central mountain, from my perspective and research and stuff, I look at it as a central mountain, like the central mountain that people have talked about in the middle of this plane or world. And so some people have referred to it as Mount Meru. There's lots of different myths and things related to it, but mountain symbolism in general, mountains are symbolic of a sacred center. And there's a reason why people want to climb the mountain. There's a reason why people want to be at the top of a building. A lot of symbols that actually stretch up towards the heavens, what they're trying to do, the implication to me is that you're trying to build a bridge from the below to the above, from earth to the heavens. And so the Tower of Babel story, building this tower, they're trying to get closer to the heavens. They wanted to either unite with God or become gods themselves, And so whether you're talking about the world tree, the world mountain, towers, I think the tower card is very much the Tower of Babel story as well. This mountain, there's this ascension. It even looks like an A, right? A for ascension, which the A looks like a pyramid, right? It even has the capstone right there with that horizontal line within the A. And so to me, this central point within the card is that middle path. It's alluding to this central pillar. And one of the things that I've heard, just going to put it out there, but I have heard some people say that this is Lucifer, that the figure above is Lucifer. And this isn't, this is just another angle that a lot of other people have said too. They equate Lucifer with Venus, right? And so this apparently is a big thing in Freemasonry, that when there's a reference to Lucifer, they're actually referencing Venus, the morning star and the evening star. So you've got this polarity, duality sort of idea with that, right?
Yep.
And I'm just noticing right here, tell me if this is a stretch, but if this is Lucifer, and Lucifer is symbolic of Venus in some ways, it almost, now I'm kind of looking at it where it's like the sun, that circle up top connecting with his head and then his arms and wings stretched out. It kind of reminds me of the glyph of Venus, actually. You have that circle up top and then you've got the cross down below. So it makes me wonder if they're actually, subliminally encoding Venus in here as well, which obviously Venusian symbolism as it relates to love and things like that is very interesting. And also, one of the things I've pointed out lately is that Venus is the only glyph that of the planets, and I'm sure of all of the signs as well, but it's the only glyph that you can actually overlay the Kabbalistic tree of life on, and the Venus glyph hits all of the Sephiroths. It's really, really wild. It's all right there, and then the hidden Sephiroth, Doth, is right there in the middle of the circle. So, which I think is really, really interesting.
Wow, that's not a stretch at all.
Right
good,
on, awesome.
Yeah, good point there.
Very cool. Yeah, I'm just I'm picking it up right now with the glyph right there. So I think that's interesting too. And then the children of the voice divine. There's different interpretations of some signs, how they relate to the human body. But the my understanding is Gemini generally relates to the arms, which I think is interesting because we're talking about division, and we even have, armies and to bear arms. And if you're going to fight, you're probably going to fight with your arms, And so there's all of this arm symbolism as it relates to aggression and conflict and things like that. But also, I've heard that Gemini relates to the lungs, given the air correspondence. And so this gives us the ability to speak and project and communicate with each other. And here they're actually united with those clouds right there. So notice that the clouds are actually going from like mouth to mouth in a way. So the idea of the voice, your voice, and the power of your voice to conjure and to create and, even create terrible things as well. The fact that you speaking can cut like a sword, right? And the fact that even sword has literally word within it. And so swords has words right there in there, so there's a lot of symbolism related to communication as well. And even just the idea that the Gemini twins, or the two pillars, or the two lovers, they're kind of like antennas, kind of like the trees as well. And antennas, they send information back and forth to each other. Which, when you look at all of the air sign symbols, it's usually comprised of two lines that aren't touching. So Gemini, you have the two lines. Libra, you have the upper line and then the lower line. And then Aquarius, you have the squiggly lines that aren't touching each other. I read once that it's kind of symbolic of like two things communicating, and then air, relating to the airwaves, right? And our voice travels through the air and all of that. So, children of the voice divine. There's a lot to say about that.
Nice. Uh, the only thing I had, I mean, it's gonna take it a little bit out there, but I'm gonna be like looking at this with like the eye stuff. Be completely different than everything that you guys just said, but I think very much with your Lucifer, though. Actually, Mario, tie in very much with that. For me, just looking at it, from just stuff that I've been covering with these other two people, and looking at tarot and just looking at parts of the eye, to me, the top of it with the sun and the wings remind me very much of the aura serrata in the eye. And right below that, you have your lens. And the lens in your eye, depending if it expands or contracts, depending on what your pupil's doing, will also push water either to the front of your eye or the back of your eye. In a fleur de lis, or even that whole type, like what you were saying before, with energy coming out like that, going around like that. So like the blue, to me, I could see that as the actual shape of the water that's getting pushed within your eyeballs. Now, where the lens sits, there is these zonules of Zin that they call. They look like little fucking spider webs that attach to your lens, and it's almost like a fucking trampoline, basically, in your eyeball. Now, in there, it looks like these tiny little fucking bundles of sticks. Interesting. Makes me start wondering where did the idea of fascism even come from. But on those bundles of sticks, you will have, it almost looks like fucking Christmas trees with like snow. You will have on those bundles of sticks at the end, it almost looks like the pomegranate seeds, like sprinkled on top of them. And they're like these little round capsule bubble looking things that actually sit on these twigs that attach to your lens. So I could see the tree being the sticks and her plant being those things that are on fucking sticks in your eyes that controls the flow of the water. That's you buy your aura serrata.
That wasn't a stretch at all, man. That was good. That was really good.
Yeah, man. I mean, I think the eye is just it's a microcosm of a macrocosm. I can't remember iridiology. Have you looked into that? I may not be saying it correctly, but you can literally look at someone's eye, and if you know what to look for, you can determine what ailments or diseases or whatever they might have. So it's a representation of our whole entire system in a lot of ways. So I think that it might be a representation of the whole system.
And what I was getting at with Lucifer, the whole thing with all that, the moving of the water, is depending on how big your pupil is. So depending on how much light or which where you're using it, your pupil is going to open and close, and you're going to have this difference of water. Kind of like when you see fountains that have those springs coming out, and you have all these gods all around them, and it's showing you the water coming out. It's because now it's pushing back up. That's the springs. And I do think that all has to do with how much light you're using in this world. So it goes right back to Lucifer in the way I'm explaining.
Yeah,
all has to do with how much light you're bringing into your eye. So
very interesting.
I'm glad you made that connection there. I'm gonna think about that one for a while now.
Even, dude, if I'm not mistaken, the sigil for Lucifer is related to the eye. Have you seen that connection?
We're gonna touch on that, and I think episode 3 of the eyes.
Nice. There you go. Yeah. Hell yeah, that's fascinating. Real quick, the last things I'll say about the Lover's card. So Crowley in the Book of the Law, which I recently reread, And he is someone that I wouldn't say I'm conflicted with him, but I know that there's lots of varying opinions about him. And I ultimately can't say I really know who he was, what his real history is. Was he some sort of plant, agent, construct sort of thing? Were there multiple Crowleys? Was he promoted for this reason or that reason or whatever? So I don't really get too caught up, and I don't get my panties in a bunch about, whether people, the things that are said about him that are disparaging or whatever, and people really, vehemently like kind of hate him. I just don't really, I'm just more neutral, I guess. I'm more passive because of all of my questions with him. But in the Book of the Law, which I recently reread, which was very interesting actually, because it had been a handful of years and there's a lot of fascinating things that I did not pick up on the first time.
I was going to say it probably was like looking at a different language now.
It totally, exactly. It really was.
That long, yeah.
But in it, he says, "For I am divided for love's sake, for the chance of union." And that, I think, speaks to the lover's card and what I was saying earlier about this division to reunite. So I am divided for love's sake, for the chance of union. So I think that speaks to that card. And then also, too, my understanding is that I believe the trees are a representation of the tree of life and then the tree of knowledge of good and evil. I think that's probably what you're looking at back there. But yeah, we can move on to the lust card here.
Yes.
All right. So, man, the first thing I want to talk about here is actually the Hebrew letter, which is Teth, which means serpent, right? Or snake. And I've made videos about this during Leo season. And long story short, there is a fascinating correlation and correspondence between serpents, felines, and dragons. And in fact, they are pretty much one and the same, I would say, in so many different ways. And so, especially the feline and serpent, because those are like real world examples of what we can actually study and everything else. But if you just think about it for a second, it's like the cats have slit eyes. Some snakes have slit eyes. Cats have fangs. Serpents have fangs. They both hiss. They even strike in a very similar manner. The way, right, a serpent strikes and the way a cat strikes. And even just kind of like the mannerisms and the cat with its tail and the tail being very expressive and stuff. And there's lore and myths that suggest that the real power of a cat comes from its tail, right? So the fact that there's this interesting correspondence between all of these things is really, really interesting to me. And it all comes together in this card. And so here you have a woman riding a lion, a seven-headed lion, which is related to the seven-headed beast of Revelation. And she is on this lion, and the lion's tail is serpentine in nature and kind of turns into a lion head as well. This is very much related to the demiurge, Sophia and the demiurge. And the demiurge having a serpentine body, or an older, kind of more esoteric understanding is that his body was worm-like, but you will often see him with a serpent body and the head of a lion. And so just with the demiurge, so the creation of Sophia, the mother of heaven, creating the first masculine energy, what are the odds that it's both a serpent and a lion? It's a hybrid of the two. And so there's even esoteric decks that I have, one in particular, but there's a deck that I have that this card, it is literally a woman riding the demiurge, the classic depiction of the demiurge. And so the demiurge being the head archon and being this tyrannical, blind god who thinks that he's the supreme deity, but he doesn't realize that there's a god above God, which is actually his mother, which is actually woman, which is where he came from. But his ego is so big that he thinks he's the end all be all of this whole entire realm, of this whole entire domain. But symbolically, this card really, it represents taming your own beast, and there's a lot of sexual symbolism related to this card, as you can imagine here. And it gets into the idea too, and this is more of like a Crowleyan sort of thing, but the idea of, the Scarlet Woman, the Whore of Babylon, and under that whole system, the way I personally perceive it is that it seems as though all women both encompass and encapsulate, and I do not look at this negatively at all, both the virgin and the whore. and men also encapsulate this idea of the beast, right? And to me, the big lesson that I've kind of taken away from all of this, and you guys let me know what you think, but the big lesson I've taken from all of this, reading Crowley's work about this card and a lot of his other material, but the idea is that, you know, the power of sexuality, it is powerful. You know, sex magic is a thing. Whether you're even trying to perform sex magic or not, it's a magical experience, right? And so you are creating every single day, whether you know it or not. And especially who you choose to couple with and partner with will also will create beautiful things, but also potentially very destructive things. And so my big takeaway from studying this card along with associated material is that I almost look at the sexual urge as just being a miracle of nature, as just being a miracle of the cosmos at large. But it is so strong that it can easily be self-destructive. So you have to kind of keep it under control. And so when I see promiscuity, and I'm seeing a lot of stuff, you know, just in the media and the way culture is, how it's turning out, and how people are kind of treating their own sexuality, and how kind of like, destructive some of the behaviors are right now, which has always been around, I think. You know, I just don't think there's any way to avoid this. So to me, I just look at it as almost a testament, in my opinion, when I hear about like really deviant behavior. I'm like, man, I was like, is this really something that I should be shaming and worried about or demonizing or whatever? Or is it actually a testament to how strong this drive is, that Mother Nature baked this into us? And whether it makes sense or not, whether you thought things through or not, whether it's healthy or self-destructive or not, people are going to have sex in many different ways. And there's nothing really you can do to kind of put a lid on it. And so to me, I just kind of accept it as almost this power that Mother Nature has hardwired into anything and everything so that life continues to be generated. And so it's up to you, the individual, to have your own moral compass, to have your own limits, to have your own boundaries with this kind of stuff. And so that's kind of the big thing. So I don't look at this horror or Scarlet Woman thing as a bad thing, or this beast thing as a bad thing. It's like, this is just like how life is. You know, if our urge wasn't as strong as it is, you know, this reality would be very different. And so I think it's about taming that beast and kind of realizing the power of your own sexuality. But in realizing that, I'm also understanding that you can't put a lid on it. You can't really funnel it into this nice, convenient sort of, package that makes you feel comfortable. It's just like human sexuality has always been a very, it's just been something that's been explored in so many different ways that it'll make your head spin, and it'll blow your mind to hear what some people are up to, you know, on a daily basis and all that kind of stuff. So, anyways, just wanted to throw that out there. Generally, this whore of Babylon, she's carrying a chalice of filth. She is the mother of abominations. And so that is what she's symbolically holding up above. And yeah, I'm sure more will come to me, but those are some of the main things that kind of come to me off the top of my head.
I 110% agree with you with that there. So, I mean, an orgasm in itself is probably the closest thing to a Kundalini awakening you can get without being on a spiritual path, right? So that's why it's so addictive. That's why it's so lustful. That's why people seek it out. Besides the fact that we need drive to survive, you know. So in this one, the very first thing that popped out to me when I looked at this was what she's holding. So I see two things here. I see clitoris, and then I also see the placenta with the snake. So the snakes could represent, you know, a Kundalini awakening as well. So, but I think that's where sex magic comes from. I mean, that's just my personal opinion, is seeking that awakening, that kind of, if you do it enough and it'll take you to places that you've never been before, right? So us as humans, we're always seeking that out. We're always trying to fill that hole, that void, that we all feel. And what it is just a disconnection from the divine. And so we search for it in many different ways, and I think this card embodies that idea very much so, because it can get out of hand and it can get bad, and your lust for things, all different kinds of things, can send you down the wrong path. And so I totally understand the concept of this card. And then I noticed, like, in the background of it actually looks like a womb, like, it's like they're encompassed in a womb. And then I also see, there's faces in here and hands, but there's I want to say that those are roses. They may be wheels, but roses symbolize desire, so that would make a lot of sense too. That's
Right.
pretty much all
Yeah,
I got.
it looks underground. It looks like that's supposed to be
Mm.
a horizon line,
Yeah.
and that they're in the soil somehow, in the womb
Yeah.
of the earth. Right.
Yeah, I would agree with that. One thing I did want to just, like, I guess, kind of piggyback and add with the Scarlet Whore and the Beast. It's just, when it comes to that, I just feel like that those are just two, like, archetype, two ways of showing, like, just archetypes to show two major forces of energy in our existence. Regardless if it's good or bad. It's just, that's all how
Exactly.
know.
And a lot of, yeah, I mean, again, you can control your own life, and you can make your own decisions, right? But the fact of the matter is that the world of sex and sex work, and even today, man, I mean, I know, like, just with the internet and pornography and, like, all of these different things, it's just like we live in a way. I've heard, history rhymes, but it doesn't repeat, sort of thing. And so, towards the end of a lot of great empires, things get very, very deviant. The fall of an empire, people start wiling out and doing all sorts of crazy things. So I think we're kind of living through that right now. And I think that a lot of people are doing it digitally. And I think that there's just a lot of stuff, going on in that whole entire scene and realm. And so, again, it's almost kind of like I'm not letting it necessarily I just know what I can control, essentially, is what I'm trying to say. And so it's just like everyone, you make your own bed, and so you're going to make your own decisions of what you think are healthy boundaries and whatnot. And some people are really pushing those limits, and they probably always have. And then, but it doesn't necessarily mean that has to be how you roll. Obviously, Crowley and people of his ilk, they were performing ceremonial sex magic rituals and things like that, which can get really, really wild as well. And some of the material I've been reading as of late regarding all of that stuff is like this idea that our bodies, are a reflection of the cosmos, and they're also a reflection of the earth. So there's this microcosm, macrocosm, as above, so below aspect with our physical bodies, which you can look at as terrain, the actual earth itself, which you can look at as terrain as well, and then the cosmos, which contains all of this stuff. So as you explore aspects of your own body sexually, you are basically exploring unknown or hidden parts of the universe as well. That's what these guys believed. That's how I'm looking at it, or that's my understanding of it, at least. And so they believe that if you're going to contact, hidden realms, hidden entities, in order to do that, you need to explore hidden realms within yourself. And the way they chose to do it was through sex magic.
One thing I did want to add to this real quick, and then we'll go on to the next card, because I really don't have anything else that you both didn't say. Just something that I thought was interesting recently when I had covered Italy. I covered, like, fascism and stuff with them with World War II. And they, at one point, when they went and invaded Ethiopia, which even at that time, the dynasty of Ethiopia, I thought was weird. They actually believed that, like, their bloodline went all the way back to King Solomon. So there was like a Solomonic dynasty. So, the Solomonic magic. But, and the reason I'm even saying that is because I do think Italy and Germany, when it came to wars in World War II, I do think that was total occultism. Italy, for some reason, when they went over to Ethiopia, and after they did horrendous stuff over there and shit, they took two things. They took an obelisk and he took the Lion of Judah. The Lion of Judah, if people listening was to go Google that right now, looks very, very much like this card.
Ah,
So I do wonder, it's like they already took the obelisk, which is an occult, thing in itself, and now the Lion of Judah. I just think that shows even more that something is up with occultism and what those two countries were doing, or
oh, sure.
are still doing, in my opinion.
Sure. Yeah, yeah. I totally hear you, man. What I'll say before we move on to the Rider-Waite version is that I'm tapping into this current of information that heavily relates this primordial mother, this dark mother, if you will, who was the first essence or energy that existed, very much with the number 7 and very much with the northern sky. And so there are 7 stars of Ursa Major, which there's a correspondence with that as well, with the 7 traditional planets and all septenary symbolism. So the 7 layers of this and that, and 7 alchemical processes and whatnot. And so to me, this is very much a representation of this mother. And one of the symbols that really, or one of the labels that always gets corresponded with her too, is that of a virgin. And so again, virgin and whore, it's like it's 2 sides of the same coin, basically,
Yes.
And so they're really kind of inseparable concepts once you really dive into it and everything else. But the fact that there's 7 heads here, and there's also other traditions that have 7-headed beasts, 7-headed monsters, things like that. I think that there's this correspondence always with the number 7 and this great goddess, this original goddess, which according to a lot of like modern, occult practitioners who are like into the Typhonian tradition, they would refer to this mother as Typhon and then the child as Set. Here you see it as the Scarlet Woman and then the Beast, but it's no different, in my opinion, than the Virgin Mary and Christ. And there's a bunch of different examples of this virgin mother creating, the first masculine energy. And actually, if you want to just go, unless someone has something to say about this card, but if you go to the Rider-Waite version, I think it's very, very explicit and clear that what you're actually looking at is Virgo, the Virgin, the Queen of Heaven, and her child, which is Leo. And they're right next to each other. So I think this card is actually an expression of the relationship between Virgo and Leo, essentially. And since we're here, I'll just mention it real quick. Isn't it interesting that the lion, the king of the jungle, right? A beast, all by himself, someone who's very, very capable, it has his tail between his legs and is being tamed by a woman who is wearing this white gown and flowers. So this is a very interesting thing within the tarot where they actually show you inverse symbolism or polar symbolism. And so you would think that the lion card associated with Leo, they would show this formidable beast, who's a warrior and all of that. But instead, they're showing the exact opposite. They're showing him being tamed. And I think it has to do with this, these lines of mythologies of this virgin woman creating her child. So I think in a way, what you're really seeing is you're seeing mother and child here.
I think that's a lot of like when it comes to like the hexagram ritual, and you start doing like the LVX formula with Isis and a breastfeeding Horus. I think that's kind of like what you're seeing too.
Totally. Yeah, you're seeing just the classic depiction of mother and child. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
You want to say anything on this one?
Yeah. So the secret name for this card in the occult is the daughter of the flaming sword and the leader of the lion. So this card is about form and force, severity and love. Force should be mitigated by love. So to me, this card means domination without strain. So it's at a point in your alchemical ascension where you're able to not let the outside world affect you, and you kind of have a hold on yourself to where you can control your reactions to other people. So it has a line in it, which is Leo, which is the element of fire. It's the marrying of the feminine and the masculine. This card has a lot of solar energy to it. So it represents like Kundalini energy. It's about harmonious relationships, your subconscious, kind of corralling your subconscious, figuring out what it is, and working with it on a deeper level. Um, it's about taming the ego, mastery of self awareness, grace, overcoming any indecision, um, and also I noticed that she's got, the wreath and the flowers, the roses around her. So this kind of goes back to the magician card where it borders on the top. Well, now she's wearing that wreath around, and kind of after manifestation with the magician, and he's learning to master the elements and shape his own reality. Well, now she's to the point where she's done that, and now she has control over that reality. So I think that's what the flowers around her dress represent. She's all about courage and fortitude. And so Leo, and then so like you were saying before, like the serpent is related to Leo as well. And so that represents Sekhmet. So she's kind of representing the warrior goddess of healing as well. It's all about greater willpower, self-reliance and restraint, grace under pressure. And this card represents the actual lighting of the alchemical fire, the process that's going to start you on the next ascension.
Excellent, excellent, nice. I like your point regarding the flowers from the magician card to this card, because they both have that infinity sign above their head as well.
Yep.
And so linking them together that way. And then also another thing that links them together, I would say, is the fact that the magician is ruled by Mercury and Virgo is ruled by Mercury as well. So the mercurial symbolism, I think, is present with her here being an aspect of Virgo, in my opinion. And
Yep.
then also with the magician. And then also I will say that the glyph for Mercury, you have the horns, you have the circle, and then you have a cross down below. And doesn't it look like they're trying to give her horns there with the, those stems?
Yeah.
So it just kind of reminds me of that a little bit. And then Mercury, again, being the traveler. And then when I think of the infinity sign, I do think of this constant traveling sort of dynamic to and fro.
Yeah. I think that infinity symbol, and I told Nick this one time, I texted it to him. I don't know if he remembers, but I told him that I was during meditation, I received information that the infinity symbol was actually a torus field.
Yeah, exactly.
So, because the torus field actually, when you're working with it in magical practice, so you think that it should go both this way, but it's actually going this way.
Yeah.
So when you're working with that energy going around, so to me, that's what the infinity symbol actually. There's a lot of different correspondences with it and things that it means, but to me, I kind of had that big revelation with the infinity symbol.
No, at the end of the day, I think you're totally right. I agree with you. Yeah, it's pretty much the same idea. Yeah, exactly. And so also too, I'll just say that the lion symbolism is interesting for a bunch of different reasons, but the mane of a lion oftentimes is related to the rays of the sun. And then, as I've been saying, this is mother and child. So Leo is ruled by the sun. So he is the sun here. And then even Christ, born of a virgin, is the Lion of Judah, right? And so, but Christ has been related to so many different things too. I look at him as more of a mercurial figure than not. I see all of the solar symbolism that he's generally associated with. But after seeing so many correspondences with his storyline and everything else, I'm like, he originally, I think, is a mercurial essence, from what I gather. So again, just kind of hammering home this idea of the sun, the line being the sun, SON and SUN.
Yeah. And I was reading somewhere, and I can't remember exactly what it meant, but the color of lions in symbolism has different meanings. Like the color, like a green lion will mean like alchemical symbolism. And I was trying to remember I read it recently, but I've forgotten all the different meanings of the different colors. But this one was chosen to be, I guess you would call this red. It looks kind of orange, but I guess you would call it a red lion.
Sure. No, yeah, you got it. There's the different colored lions. Absolutely. And then I guess I'll just say, too, the fact that if this is a representation of Virgo, the whole thing with Virgo symbolism, I think that one of the key words for me that really unlocked a lot of information is veil, and that there's lots of veil symbolism with the Virgin, and even the hymen is looked at. It's a veil. It's a veil that gets broken. A bride, she wears the veil, and then it's lifted when she gets married by a patriarchal figure. And so one of the deep encodes with Virgo is that she is the queen of heaven essentially, and she's also the queen of earth, but in her queen of heaven role, it's symbolically relevant in both aspects. So when we want to sow a seed, we put it into the ground. So it's in the darkness, it's within the soil. The idea with her being the queen of heaven is that if she was the original essence, this primordial goddess, one of the storylines is that deep within her, deep behind her veil, there is a light that she created and birthed, but she did it on her own, hence virgin. So she did not have a partner. And so deep within her, deep behind the veil, is this light, the first light as well. And so this light is symbolic of her child, essentially, whether it's Christ or whether it's this lion or the demiurge or whatever. To me, the symbolism pretty much all just matches up anyway. So this idea of the veil and the fact that she has that masculine potential deep within her, that's where it all came from.
Nice. I'll add some more like kind of like eye symbolism again with this. When I was covering it recently, I kind of, in my opinion, it just seems like there's like a story line I could see as you're going through different stages of the eye. And I do think at one point you kind of like come out of water, and then you're technically, I guess, in a sense, like almost in the Garden of Eden with the tree there. And then at some point you have to still climb up that tree to the point to where it's like you're almost like Tarzan swinging from the ropes, in the trees. There will be like a story, as crazy as that sounds. So I do think this is what I'm seeing here. I do think she may technically be the hyaloid canal, depending on when your lens, I think it's the lens that does it, changes. It will also cause the hyaloid to bend or bow a little bit, which makes me wonder about people bowing to each other. You will bow a little bit, but at the optic nerves that are all the way at the top, again, look like those wreaths. And the other thing I'm thinking of that's making me think that is that your eyes are yoked. If one pupil changes, the other one does. There's ways of like taking, I think, certain geometric shapes or things, whatever, and putting them in one eye, and it will change it and not the other. But naturally, your eyes are yoked. The best way, I think, to explain yoking, think of like a tank. Their thing goes around the wheels, and they all go in the same direction. If you were to take those wheels and twist it, those wheels would be going different directions. They'd be unyoked and would look like that infinity symbol as well. And I think there is unyoking of eyes in a sense when you start playing around with fucking magic. So I think this is all showing you that.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
Which could even be why you have yellow and white, just like an egg.
Yeah, exactly. I was gonna say that.
That's funny.
One
last thing I'll say about this card that I think is significant and important is the proximity of the lion's head to her pelvic region, to her groin area. And so to me, this symbolically represents the taming of that beast. And especially for a woman, acknowledging, well, basically, women get to choose who they couple with, And so I heard some comedians say it recently, almost kind of like, get with the woman who wants to be with you versus trying to chase that girl who maybe is not that interested, right? And so it's like the woman really gets to dictate all of this stuff, which actually gets into which I don't think we're going to get into it today, but it gets into the Justice card and the idea of Lady Justice. And so I've heard from a really good symbologist in one of her books, she was saying that the idea of justice being related to a woman has to do with the fact that there were these old traditions where women used to judge the men, in athletic competitions, and they used to judge the men based on how fit they were and how capable they were, and they used to look at the men and be like, oh well, I want to partner with this one, I want to partner with this one, not so much the guy who can't really hold his own or defend himself or defend my family or whatever. So there's a long tradition actually associating decision making with women because they get to decide who they want to reproduce with, essentially. So in a way, when I see Virgo around the jaws of the lion, to me, one of the things that people have said over the years is like, is she closing the jaws of the lion or is she opening the jaws of the lion? There is this interpretation there, right? But it's like symbolically, is she opening her yoni or closing her yoni? Does she have the awareness of the power that she has with that, with who she allows to couple with? And everything else. So again, taming this beast sort of idea. I don't think it's a coincidence that the lion's head is very close to her, reproductive area generally. I think that symbolically, this is very much related.
Yeah,
Very
I'd
well
agree
said.
there.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I got for the strength card.
Awesome. All right. We'll go on to the next one. Yeah.
Okay.
Nice.
There you go, sir. You can see that?
Yeah, totally. So the Hermit card, this corresponds with Virgo. So it's really interesting. This is another example of this reversal sort of concept where Virgo is the virgin, and here we have the Hermit, an old man. So very interesting. The old man is kind of the polar opposite of a young woman, basically. And so what is he doing? The Hermit is traveling in the dead of night. He has his lantern, and he, at least here, is looking at this Orphic egg, which we saw in the Lover's card, right? And so the wheat is spreading, and it is revealing that egg. The wheat symbolically corresponds with Virgo. So when you look at Virgo in the night sky, or if you look at depictions of Virgo in the night sky, the constellation of Virgo, she is generally holding either a bundle of wheat, or she's holding a palm branch, a frond, or she's holding what's the other thing? There's two or three different plants that she's holding, but those are the most common ones. So either this palm branch or the bundle of wheat. The other one will probably come to me, but she's usually holding one of these items. And so this is in substitute of her actually holding her child. And also this corresponds with the wheat harvest as well. Because my understanding is that you harvest wheat either in Virgo or Libra, and then the scales of Libra corresponds with the fact that you want to weigh how much grain you have so that you can actually sell it at the market and everything else. So there's this really intimate correspondence with the weighing of things, obviously, and Libra being the scales. And also there being equal parts day and night during the time of Libra because it's the fall equinox. And so wheat corresponds with Virgo in so many different ways. It's kind of nuts. But when I see it here, I see the sexual symbolism of, again, kind of what I was talking about. It's almost like this feminine door opening, this feminine gate opening. If it's just wheat in a field or whatever, symbolically, I don't think it's a big stretch to kind of imagine that this masculine energy is looking for the divine feminine, and the divine feminine is spreading and revealing, kind of the object of his desire, I would say, in so many different ways. So I kind of think of Bush symbolism, and the sexual innuendo of that, of the parting of waters, if you will, another metaphor for this. And so you have this parting, and that's the object of his desire. So I think in so many ways, the Hermit is looking for his divine feminine, which is why he's traveling at night, and which is why, this is his whole entire search. So the Hermit and the Hermetic phase of isolation very much corresponds to cave symbolism as well, which is also the womb. But it all has to do with going within. Everything about the Hermit card suggests going within. And one of the things I like to talk about is the number 9 being symbolic of going within as well, because 9 always returns back to itself. So 9 plus 9 is 18, 1 plus 8 is 9. You add another 9, that's 27. 2 plus 7 is 9, then 36, that's 9. 45, that's 9. So no matter how many times you multiply 9, if you reduce it, it always returns back to itself. Same thing when you half it. So half of 9 is 4.5, that's 9. Half of that is 2.25, that also adds up to 9. So 9 above and below always returns back to itself, which is really kind of amazing. And that's what this card represents. It's a return back to yourself, right? And I think as a man, my personal opinion is when you return back to yourself, you're going to find the sacred feminine. Occultism and all this stuff, it goes back to the sacred feminine. It goes back to the dark feminine, you know, and even his name, Hermit, right? It's almost alluding to that as well, right? So that is what he's searching for, in my opinion. That's what he's trying to reconnect with, which is just an aspect of himself. There's sexual symbolism in here with that sperm cell as well, with that little baby homunculus looking type thing in the head of the sperm cell. And so also too, I'll say that this occurred to me a few years ago. Does it not look like the hermit here is supposed to be a subliminal tongue? To me, I think that he's supposed to be a subliminal tongue, and the tongue in the mouth is the phallic aspect of your mouth. And the mouth itself would be the receptive yoni-like aspect of that system there. And so it's almost like he is the phallus, which is why we'll see in the Rider-Waite version, he's very upright and he has his staff. You know, he almost looks like an erection or something. And I even have older cards too, where literally the hermit has a mushroom cap on, you know, a mushroom head on his head, you know, alluding to this phallic sort of symbolism. So to me, the big sort of thing I see is the phallus seeking the yoni, essentially. And then all of the symbolism to me just kind of breaks down from there.
Wow, that's wild.
So for me, again, the geometric shapes is what gets me with this. I recently watched a video too where they said that Crowley, the artist that he picked to do this deck, that he almost drove her crazy, changing it up constantly all the time. So this one is very interesting to me. So the Hermit card is about introspection, turning within. So he is turning away, right, inward on himself. I do see the sperm symbolism there, the cosmic egg. So, you know, mastering the cosmos is going within, mastering the cosmos. That's the cosmic egg. The 3-headed dog could represent mind, body, and spirit kind of coming together. If you want to master those things, you got to tame that beast of all 3 of those things. And you do that through introspection. I like the use of the lantern here. It almost looks like the thelemic symbolism in the middle there with the light in the middle, you know, the thelema symbol.
Yeah.
I didn't really realize that was wheat. So that was a really interesting correspondence that I find that really interesting. I'm going to think about that a little bit more. But that's pretty much all I have to say about this one. And I didn't even realize that looks exactly like a tongue. It does. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's what they were going for sure. Real quick too, I'll just say in this card as well, because you can see the Hebrew letter correspondence. So it's Yud or Yod, and that represents hand. And so it's also a little flame, right? And so in that tradition, the idea is that this is like the spark that created the rest of the Hebrew alphabet. It's the smallest letter. And so it's the genesis or origin of the rest of the letters. And so, but it means hand. And you see pretty much front and center here, his hand, you know? And so hand symbolism is really interesting. And what is he holding with his hand? He's holding a lamp. Well, it's kind of curious because lamp is an anagram for palm. And I was just saying that Virgo oftentimes holds a palm branch. And the reason why palms get their name is because they look like hands oftentimes. You know, you have that trunk and then you've got the palms kind of just, or the branches splitting off from it. So there's a very strong correspondence between palms and the palm tree being related to a lot of cultures' world tree, like Middle Eastern cultures, desert cultures, like that's their world tree basically. And so when she's holding, again, Virgo's holding that palm branch, she's holding her child. And so there's just kind of a few curious, connections there with that between the hand, the palm, and the different associations with that word even.
Nice. All right, we'll go on to the next one.
Okay,
There you
so the secret name for this one is the Prophet of the Eternal, or the Magus of the Voice of Power. So the Hermit is all about introspection, going within, gaining wisdom in that, kind of going it alone. Sometimes in your magical practice, you have to do this. You have to do it actually quite often, kind of separate yourself from the noise so that you can turn within and kind of figure out exactly, what you need to do. This card represents the meeting of a call to destiny, finding a guide and receiving a spiritual name, usually, because this one's associated with like a guide or a sage, somebody that can kind of point you in the right direction to help you on your path to enlightenment. This also represents higher levels of initiation. And it's all about transformation and transmutation without interruptions. It's also the second stage of the alchemical process of dissolution. So dissolution means to take something, add water to it, and kind of break it down a little bit farther. So this one is kind of a mix between the keys 9 and 10. It's the final part of the descent down the wheel of the 231 gates. So this card's about seeking to understand the universal laws. And it's all about kind of experiencing the alchemy at work in your soul while you're doing this, while you're going within and turning within. His lamp illuminates your path. It kind of guides you down where you need to go. So to go back to the numerology thing with the number 9. So 9 is always the end of cycles. Like you said, you break it down over and over and over again. It's always itself. So it's about the ending of cycles. And we've got, so the 6-pointed star that he's holding there, that has some correspondences too. So it represents the light of wisdom and truth. It's about the oneness of identity. It's the principle of the union of as above, so below. It's about fire and water, masculine, feminine, spirit, and body. So that's what the 6-pointed star represents in occultism. And then you have the staff. So when you become an adept, the size of your wand is going to be differently than the size of someone who's like a master, right? So usually, like if you're an initiate, you have a wand that has two, like a black end and a white end, right? Traditionally, it had lotuses on the end of them. But so, and it's measured from like, when you're an adept, I think it's from your elbow to the tip of your hand. And then a master is the spine to the top of the head. So this kind of reminds me of that. So that's how they knew the difference between each other, like, in orders or anything like that, was, the size of their wand that they used. So he's obviously been through that whole process, and he's actually carrying a staff. So he's transcended that. And it also represents the middle pillar. So if you were to like transpose the tree of life with this card, he's actually the middle pillar, and his body actually lines up with both sides, and his body is the middle pillar. So in the universal deck, he's got a blue hood up. So that also harkens back to the high priestess, about gaining the knowledge. Well, he's at the point where he's gotten the knowledge, and now he's using the knowledge that the high priestess kind of lets you in on. And so the gray color, there's this predominant gray color. So gray represents the black and the white coming together in unity, duality, polarity. And it also represents wisdom, because you've united the two together and you have that gray color. And so they've got the mountain symbolism in the back as well. And so that's like climbing the mountain of ascension. We were talking about the mountain symbolism before. So he's all about understanding the laws of the cosmos. Um, he's always got the next level ahead of him. He's kind of figured that out. He's at a point in his transformation where he's figured out the next level that he needs to go to because he's turned within and kind of, it makes me think of like the Big Bang. You know how they say it kind of like imploded on itself, right? You kind of have to have that compact, high pressure thing, kind of like in the other card where he was turning in on himself. I think maybe that's what the geometric symbolism was kind of about too, was like kind of going within so that you can explode out.
Well, it's kind of like almost showing a redirection of energy too.
Yeah, exactly. That's all these cards are. They're just redirections of different types of energy that you need to progress on your path. And then you've got obviously the Virgo symbolism, and then Mercury is associated with Virgo, and which is also associated with the magician too. So this is just another form of the magician. Kind of, he's mastered the shaping of his reality, and now he's at the point where he's become wise, and now it's time to kind of switch gears again. And this card is a lot about like accepting the rhythms of the natural laws in your life and kind of figuring out how to twist and turn those and figure out, you know, the next point. You can even think of it like if he was a guide telling you the different way to go, right? So you can have people that will help you do that, or you can do that yourself too, right? So that's another thing with Virgo and the Virgin. You know, immaculate conception, right? Well, this kind of ties in with that whole thing too. And so basically he is known as like the teacher of the initiates. That's the person that, you know, you've become initiated, you're hanging out, you're learning everything, and he's the one that kind of guides you down the path. That hence the light that he's carrying there for you, and the staff. He's giving you the knowledge, the hidden knowledge that you need to progress. So that's pretty much all I've got about that one.
Excellent. Good stuff.
Yeah.
I really like your breakdown.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it reminds me of a few things in this whole this guide business, right? I can't not think of the role of the psychopomp being the guide of souls. And my kind of conclusion with this card actually is that I believe what we're essentially seeing here is Christ at an advanced age. That Christ being this spiritual guide, you know, guiding his flock, Christ being the good shepherd, we are actually seeing Christ, a different emanation of Christ at a different point in his life. And so I believe that this hermit figure, obviously he always has that white beard and he's older and things like that, but he has gone on quite a journey, and this journey led him to do deep introspection, right? And so that's why he's going through this hermetic phase. And so I think that Christ being the good shepherd and this figure being a potential guide of souls, and Christ and this figure very much being related to Mercury. Again, Mercury being this traveler, being this messenger, right? Going to different places and stuff. And you learn a lot about yourself when you travel as well, right? The path of the fool. You know, he's starting this journey. He's going to learn a lot about himself. There's going to be peaks and valleys and everything else. Here, as you mentioned, it looks like he's at a peak. It looks like he's at the peak of a mountain, right? And so that's one of the revelations I had recently, that this is a Christ-like figure, but he's much older. And then you also mentioned, I love what you said about the wand stuff and the different, you know, the size of the wand versus the size of the staff and everything else. That's really interesting, because it relates back to what I was saying too as well, with the phallic symbolism of this card and the fact that the phallus is a magic wand, you know. And so the phallus is a magic wand, and the wand also has a correspondence with the spine, and spine is an anagram for penis. And so that's not a mistake. And so it kind of represents his backbone as well. And therefore, I think represents the world axis, you know, the point of which everything revolves around, in my opinion, the point from which the heavens revolve around, this axle. And so I think that very much is related to this card as well. And yeah, also the last thing, 9, even when you just draw the 9, you know, it almost looks like it wants to curl back into itself, kind of like the 6 as well. right? So I think it just kind of speaks to the symbolism of going within. But yeah, I love this card, man. It's so epic and awesome. I
Yeah,
can't
it's
get
one of
enough
my
of it.
favorites.
100%. Yeah, same here.
Yeah, I should have probably probably end it with this one, which I should have probably have added the hermit card that I have and the golden. Oh, you know what? Maybe I'll download it real quick. Forget about it. I'll just try to explain it as I'm going. Because like that one, I think would be like really easy for people to actually. I got it. I'm gonna put it up on the screen. Where is it? There we go. That's the one that I have. The golden dawn.
Oh, nice. Oh, cool. Yeah, they're putting the yodes right there with the within the palm, within the hand, and then the lamp. Right.
Yes.
That's pretty rad. I've been
Now,
meaning to pick this one up forever, but
I need to get this one too.
now with this card, the way I just covered it recently, I really think this is actually a really good example to show it. Which is the only reason I even pulled this one card up. I do think, again, going back to the eye stuff, when you look at the lens inside your eye, it does this.
yeah.
It reflects your lens the same way that is. You have a snake underneath him that's basically, if you look at it, it's not eating its tail yet. It's kind of open. And then you have this one, it's wrapped around it. I do think you are going to see pupil size being changed again here, which is exactly what an open and closed hand, I think, is represented.
Ooh, I love
Yeah.
that. Yeah. Open and
Now,
closed hand.
the lens of your eye looks like if you were to Google the lens of your eye and then like a reptile skin or a dry desert floor, it almost looks like the same shit.
Mm.
So I do think this is actually kind of showing, and then a cactus that also holds water. I do think this could also just be showing like some change in direction, almost like turning a key to a sense. Going back in, maybe this is like, I don't know, but what I think this is showing in a sense is maybe like kind of like how I was saying before, you have different stages inside your eyeball that I think you like, the Garden of Eden and everything. I think like you're leaving the desert and like your lens and actually heading towards now your hyaloid canal, depending that's showing like your lens, the lens and your cornea. My bad. I've been using the wrong word. Your cornea looks just like sand, the reptile skin, and all that shit. I think you're seeing going from the front of your eye all the way to your lens now, heading towards the hyaloid canal. I think you're seeing the progression in this. It would be upside down would probably be the best way to really explain that. If I was to turn the card upside down, you would have the granule cornea here, and then you would be eventually rising to the lens, depending on how open your pupil is going to be. And then this could be the hyaloid canal. All I know.
Wow.
Interesting.
The hand of God, open to closed, maybe your pupil.
I like how it says logos on there too, on his hood.
Yeah, what I like that I'm noticing is this. I love the Ouroboros inclusion there on the ground, right? And it symbolically is perfect. Actually, I think this is really, really slick. And I think kind of what it makes me think of is just the circumpunct. So it's the circle with the dot right in the middle. I can't not think about it the same way you can't not think about the eye stuff. I can't not think about the circumpunct right now. And what I've been thinking about lately is just the fact that the circle has infinite points, and then that dot in the middle is 1 point. And so I think that just within this very simple glyph, which now most people know it as the symbol for the sun, but within this simple glyph, I think there's so much to unpack and so much to talk about. But the main thing is that the outer circle represents the infinite, and then that central point represents the finite. That outer circle represents the divine feminine, the cosmos, the womb of the universe, and that central point represents her creation, I would say, as I've kind of been talking about a little bit today. And so he is representing that finite point. That finite point is more masculine. You can look at it as it's a phallic sort of symbol. You know, the central point versus the feminine circle. You know, that curve, the curves of woman and the curves of life and everything else. So I kind of just see him as that point within the infinite, basically.
You know, I could be wrong, but now you said yod is the thing that goes with this, correct?
Yeah.
Isn't the value of that 10,
Off the top of my head, I don't know, but that sounds about right.
which would be the staff in the circle?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, totally,
Yeah,
totally.
he's the yeah. I mean, that we could take it
So
even
that's really
farther,
cool, man.
but
I like this.
yeah. And then I guess that's really all. I don't think. I mean, to go into another card, they'll probably take too much time. So I think we can leave it there if you guys are okay with that.
Yeah, because I got 3
I'm good.
notes on the Wheel of Fortune, 3 pages.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I have other stuff that I could even go into that without touching on the eye. So
Same thing, just to mention
yeah.
it real quick, that wheel has that central axis.
Yep.
Okay. So it's just kind of like the symbolism's all there, and I relate this central axis to the pole star. Because if you look up in the night sky, the pole star is the central star that all of the other stars revolve around. So I think that there's a relationship there. But yeah, good stuff, guys.
Yeah,
Yeah.
hell yeah, that was great. I
This
had a
one
great
was awesome. I loved it.
Thank you. Yeah, real quick, just to let everybody, so in case they didn't hear you the first time, real quick, Megan, let everybody know where they can find your stuff.
You guys can find me on Instagram. It's my main page at 7 degrees of wisdom spelled out. No underscores, dashes, numbers on the end. There's some people out there that are copying my account still. I guess the big one right now is the one with the 01 on the end. That's not me. Please do not follow them. And then on Facebook, it's Megan Allen, and then in parentheses, 7 degrees of wisdom spelled out on Facebook. If you guys want to get a hold of me for any kind of reading or class, I do everything that I do in person. I completely do online as well. So if you guys are interested in taking any one of my classes, you can see the classes that I do on my Instagram page. Yesterday, I did one on psychic phenomena. That was really, really interesting. So if you guys want to get a hold of me for any of those services, just message me on one of those platforms. Eventually, I will have a website and a YouTube channel and all that stuff. It's coming. But for right now, Instagram and Facebook is how you can get a hold of me.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And I'm pretty sure the show notes are in there already. And Mario, let everybody know where they can find your stuff as well.
Yeah, sure thing. So once again, symbolicstudies.com is probably just the simplest, easiest way to find all of my links. I have, posters for sale, hand silkscreen prints. There's one right behind me over there. So you can find links to my Etsy and my, Instagram and YouTube and all that stuff from there.
Awesome. And then, I'm pretty sure your stuff is in there as well already. Thank you both very much. I thought that was a great episode. That was a great talk. Great stuff, man. I learned a lot, and I like how all three of us look at it differently, really.
Yeah.
I still think it all comes together and makes sense anyway. So.
Yeah.
Sure.
I love it. Thank you both very much for this experience. Thank you, everybody, too, who jumped in on the live. That must have been all your people, Mario. Thank you for that. I saw a chunk of my own listeners as well, but that's what's up. Thank you for all for jumping in on the chat. I will be honest, unfortunately, because I wanted to kind of pay attention to what they were saying, too. I couldn't keep track of the chat. Sometimes I'm a little bit more vocal. I try to joke around. But when I'm paying attention, I'm sorry. I can't do both. But thank you all for jumping in anyway. That's what's up. I love seeing that, trying to, interact with the listeners. That's great. Until the next one, everybody be well. Later.